All right, so on to the next one. So, ready or not, we're getting into the shadows of the third hub, and these ones are hot, 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 and really great. So, are you ready for this? There's a lot of reading here, so I think I'm just gonna dip in and because I try to keep these around 30 minutes. I think it would be better if I could get them to 15, but it's just not how it's playing out. And I just kind of go with the flow on this. A lot of what I'm doing with this is just creating like a record of me reading it for the first time. And I've talked about all the reasons that I'm wanting to do this as like a companion for people who are reading it. Like the importance of, I think that the thing about reading it alone when you're just reading the book is, it's a particular experience. So there is almost even a feeling for me that I'm not reading it alone as I'm reading it to you. So the shadows of anger and shame. So we start with anger, which is when anger is expressed, it's not precise. And when it isn't given a voice or a constructive outlet, it becomes volatile and unpredictable, which can often lead to guilt and shame. Anger is a natural and powerful response to being shamed, belittled, undermined, and disrespected. I'm going to slow down a little bit. Every human being should expect and deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. When these are denied, a natural corrective impulse of integrity rises first as irritation, then as frustration, then anger, and eventually rage. Emily Dickinson wrote, "Anger, as soon as fed, is dead. 'Tis starving makes it fat." If anger doesn't get an opportunity to be expressed, it goes underground and can be triggered and explode over the light footfall of an unrelated minor incident. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the challenges of anger is that we have to like unwind narratives that told us that we're not allowed to be angry about things, or that we're being too sensitive, or that the topics are, it's like really it really is like, what are you allowed to be angry about? And so this goes back into like second first hub, which is we need to be able to feel ourselves, and we need to be able to connect to the understanding of like when something feels like it is infringing on our integrity. And even this thing of like, that is enough, that is enough. And the thing about like, if we have an inclination to not be able to say that for many reasons, that this organic quality of our within ourselves, which will not allow us, allow us to um, like to almost like bow to oppression, is that it just speaks up. But if we don't have the awareness to understand it, and in this case now as adults, to like explore and learn aspects of its intricacy, it becomes this quality about ourselves that feels like it comes out of nowhere. Becomes like like, oh, I'm just always mad, and I'm, like, just these are things that these shadows are parts of ourselves that really, when our narrative is stacked against us, that we really see this stuff as being um like the part of ourselves that's like, oh, this is the part I'm trying to hide, this is the truth coming out, or whatever. Like, but this notion, like, without like of just like a real heavy emphasis on these qualities and these behaviors. And the thing is, like, when we have these we have these relationships with ourselves, taking responsibility for these behaviors becomes harder because we're not even fully aware of why and how and where it's arising. So, the popular narrative that to accept these things about ourselves would be like blasphemy is like, well, the more shame we pile on top of it, the more defensive we become about it. And the more defensive we are, the less likely we are to concede our responsibility and our role in a dynamic or in a situation. And when the judgment is softened, when these qualities are like, when we can replace shame with acceptance and some grace and accountability, that shifts that creates a, just an extraordinary shift. So anger is a surge of energy that asserts itself in the service of our integrity. It can be used to push through tough tasks or to move out of inertia. Anger is a consequence, the energy to defend and correct. If we don't get angry and take action about being hurt, witnessing injustice towards others, or being poorly treated, we may allow it to keep happening. Read again. If we don't get angry and take action about being hurt, witnessing injustice towards others, or being poorly treated, we may allow it to keep happening. Just like fear and guilt, when used properly in moderation, anger can be constructive and be a constructive and activating tool that supports us. Hopefully, we learn some self-control during early third hub development. A mature third hub can transform anger from a destructive impulse into constructive action. Hold on. Yep. All right. Resentment is indignation over not being treated fairly and often contains trapped rage. When anger has been suppressed for too long, it can become rage, which needs to be managed and given an outlet to discharge within safe boundaries. If we were not treated with dignity and respect, understandably, we can feel angry and cheated. This profound natural impulse to correct for injustice may lack fineness or accuracy and may be directed at people unrelated to the original insult or abuse. The mantra of trapped rage is, "That's not fair." Say these words aloud with conviction and notice how your body responds. That's not fair. If you feel energy rising, move it out through stomping, hitting a sofa, hitting a soft object like a pillow, journaling, or talking with someone who can hold the space for you to process. Without anger, there's inaction. When there's inaction, suffering expands and multiplies. In the Parinama method, I seek to destigmatize anger and move it through safe and constructive actions. Ooh. Yeah, I'm feeling that. I'm feeling that. That's good. There's something to explore. Yeah. There's a lot of fear around the power of anger. Sometimes it seems like controlling it is the only thing keeping us out of jail. Sometimes anger will express itself in ways that can either be as electric and scary as a live wire, or it can create rigidity in the body as we attempt to control it. That is, until it inevitably lashes out with an outsized response to a stressor unrelated to the original offending event. But once it's been surfaced to our conscious awareness, we begin to have real choices about what to do with it. It is like me, this is me editorializing, it is power. It is power. And as we've discussed in this chapter, and hopefully this has come across, this is the ultimate taboo, is to have power. And to suppress somebody and to minimize them and make them feel less powerful is going to give them a source of power. And the like ultimate bind in this is to make that power, like label that power as like disgusting, revolting, out of control, and to create shame. It's one of the greatest head fucks of all time. Saying, people like they're like the anger is unjustified. If you feel anger, it is justified. It's just, look, there may need to be some exploration of what the source of it is and who we hold accountable. But the idea that anger is arising out of some place within you, there's just this kind of this thing, this darkness, how dangerous that notion is to the sense of self. That my anger isn't a response, it's a darkness in me that wants to push and cause harm and fight back. Your anger is real and it's a response to something, and it needs to be effectively moved through, processed, and respected. Now, this is where anger, this is like, you want to talk about one of the cycles of trauma being passed, sort of like a virus, is that the anger winds up being directed at folks who are, innocent relative to the dynamic that created the anger. So our frustrated infant cries were our first expressions of anger. We had needs and couldn't explain them to our caregivers, so we cried until they figured it out. As adults, the rising urgency when needs and feelings are not being understood, respected, or considered is reminiscent of our early irritations and frustrations. Any constant or significant sense of lack in Daniel Brown's 5 Essentials, see chapter 5, will contribute to core frustration. You were in Parinama for Beginners, you're familiar with these. When anger rises, it can feel overwhelming and scary, and as responsible adults, we often need to conceal it. But eventually, it needs a constructive outlet when anger is suppressed. As Saul Bellows wrote in The Adventures of Augie March, everybody knows there is no fineness or accuracy of suppression. If you hold down one thing, you hold down the adjoining. Here. Take a breath on that. So it's very likely that that was activating. So to take a moment with that is to notice that activation. Is there any physical sensation arising? We're going to slow down because the activation is very likely like hot and charged. It's not a relaxing. It's not a, that's an act, it's high voltage. And very likely high voltage because it is probably evocative. Maybe it's the first time you've really contemplated that something about yourself that you think is dark and evidence of flaw. It's actually a justified reaction. Maybe a reaction to something you don't even understand. Maybe something that happened so early. You were just little, without a defense, and you weren't allowed an outlet for it. So it's just still in there. I'm just shaking my hands out a little bit. We'll get into the techniques and exercises next. You can do stomping. It's really good if your feet are bare and they're kind of like slapping against the floor. There. Move it out. It's a little more charging for me right now, so I'm going to like, yeah. Just allow it to settle a little bit. Right now in this moment, you're safe. And tools, you're getting tools. Tools and protections. And ways to see things. So you can solve for things. You can untangle things. You can unwind things. Even in the charged feelings, that it's like this is getting closer to what I call like peace or resolution in a sense. Because even to express anger in a constructive way by acknowledging its existence, acknowledging you may have this feeling inside of you that needs to be processed and moved out. You can do this. You could do this. You know, there's a lot, there's just, I mean, it's like alluded to in the reading. It's alluded to the reading that, you know, there's this kind of thing when we're going to read next about shame, is like shame and anger are kind of, you know, sort of in this like unholy union inside of us where we're ashamed of our anger. It's like considered to be like the ugliest thing. So you see somebody being enraged, right? Like, oh, or one of the taboos. And so it's like, oh, you don't want anybody to see your anger, or maybe you do, or what, you know, but that's what we are untangling. So I'm going to do one more bell and we're going to start reading again. There. And if you have to, pause. If not, we keep going. So shame. Okay, so again, guilt is a bad feeling about a specific action, and shame is the outsized, overwhelming sense of being fundamentally flawed. See chapter 5. Shame places conditions on our self-acceptance, attracting others who share and validate these belief systems, and acts as a forcing function for adopting cultural norms, even when they conflict with our integrity and authenticity. Men can feel undermined by having so-called feminine qualities, such as being gentle, small, or short. And women can be made to feel undesirable when they're labeled masculine and judged as too assertive, successful, and competent, and even large, right? In an interview with The Atlantic, Brene Brown, author and academic who researches shame, states that messages of shame are organized around gender and discusses how women have whole constellations of often contradictory expectations that, if not met, are sources of shame. But that for men, the overarching message is that any weakness is shameful. And since vulnerability is often perceived as weakness, it is especially risky for men to practice vulnerability. In Brown's Netflix special, she also says that shame is often expressed for women through their relationship with their bodies, its size and appearance, and men tend to have shame tied to their abilities, which can include athletic performance, professional stature, earning money, and in sexual power and prowess. So the shame cycle. When shame is overused to teach us lessons, it climbs on board and goes along for the journey until it's discovered and made to leave. Shame makes shame possible. It's a vicious cycle of secrecy that's particularly effective because it creates a sense that there's something about us others can't know of, else they would lose respect for us or reject us. That one, I get that one. The feeling that we'd face exile and despair if the truth were known can be carried for so long that we come to believe it's true. In the shame cycle, what we protect and hide in our mind multiplies and expands. We're all capable of doing hurtful and cruel things, but this does not make us unworthy of redemption or separate us from our humanity, although shame will certainly indicate otherwise. There's shame over things we've done, and there's shame and regret for feeling helpless if we've watched another person suffer and didn't stop it. We often forget how small and powerless we were as children when we reflect back as adults. A child who could not come to the aid of a sibling or a parent when either needed help may not consider its own helplessness during the moment of an attack, a moment of an incident. There can be overwhelming survivor's guilt and shame, such as when soldiers survive an attack that wounds or kills nearby fellow soldiers. Soldiers with survivor's guilt and shame tend to forget that their life was also in danger. As children, we couldn't see the adults in our lives as valuable. Even when we defied them, we considered their approval and perspective to be practically absolute, so feeling safe enough to confront them was a complex matter. I interviewed Julie, who grew up in a home with her brother Josh and their strict and unrelenting mother. While their mother was generally harsh with both of them, her penalties on Julie were relatively minor compared to those she imposed on Josh. She struggled as the frequent target of her mother's rage. Oh, he struggled. He struggled as the frequent target of his mother's rage, and over time began to change from a sweet, goofy boy into an unpredictable recluse. Julie told me she remembers wanting to stand up for him, was too afraid, and now she feels shame and guilt as she watches Josh struggle in his adult life. As a child, it was simply not possible for Julie to do anything, a notion she felt was both comforting and very sad. Yeah. So, both shame and anger and all of the shadows are actually part of the natural self-corrective ecosystem of who and what we are. So shame, if we do something that causes considerable harm to another person, it's in our database and in our, like, within our suite of responses to have a corrective response if we've caused harm, to want that feeling to go away. The feeling that overwhelms us so much that we absolutely can't ignore it. It's sort of like an innate, natural morality, which just calls for like a restorative, reparative, reparative response. So when shame is so distorted that we're ashamed of everything, and it's like ashamed of what we look like in an outfit, or ashamed of, the fact that, like, it's just these ridiculous, like, not ridiculous, but I just want to say, just like, like what the things that shame like is used for are, like, what they do is they separate us from this innate, like, organic, naturally arising responsiveness that is about the inherent trust we can have in our integrity. So to have this other shame, to have this shame about, wow, if everyone knew I didn't finish college, if everyone knew that, last night I ate, an entire chocolate cake, if everyone knew I'd, been promiscuous and I'd slept with people, a lot of people, like, if everyone knew I was, like, actually addicted to heroin for 2 years in my 20s, like, and not like these aren't my stories, but I'm using them as examples. I'm thinking of the things that I'm like, oh, they're just first coming up. Um, like, the thing is, like, the shame of that is, like, the person that was harmed in most of those scenarios is, like, oneself. So maybe that's part of it, is that there's some type of shame about having done something where we hurt ourselves. And then, on some level, I don't think that that's how it gets internalized, but maybe that's part of how that can, like, work so effectively. But realizing that shame, part of almost like what we want by right sizing how shame operates in our life, is that we want shame to be able to operate the way, like, in this very natural way. Same with anger. Same with anger. The anger is just, and it's so important because it's the natural corrective function for our integrity. And in some ways, these shadows, so to speak, are actually the voices of our integrity. They're the integrity reflexes. And because they get hijacked, co-opted, overused, that we lose our connection to that part of the voice of our integrity. And this is part of what we're trying to get back. So if we've caused harm to someone, that we could feel that shame and go, that's really something that's important to deal with. Like, I really need to deal with that. It's not even cognitive. It's just that our morality is actually, like, in our, like, being. Correctiveness, civilization. It's in our being. It's coded in our responses. We just lose it becomes externalized because now somebody else has to tell us what we should be ashamed of, because we're ashamed of everything, right? Or, like, someone else has to, with anger, because we're not supposed to be angry culturally at a lot of things that we're angry about. So the best thing to do is just turn it on the person and say, you're not supposed to be angry. And your anger actually makes you a criminal. or it makes you like irresponsible, or it makes you like socially toxic or whatever, you know. Look at the people that like are seen as angry. Look at people who are seen as angry. And look what is done to them. They're turned into villains and clowns, disempowered, further making them angrier. I mean, that's one of the things. If somebody is angry with you, it's like the best thing you do is laugh at them. Get angry. I mean, back to this thing about the tangle. You know, you get angry back. It's like, delicious. See, this is a thing. The belief system gets a validation, so it's like yum yum yum. But if you literally look at it and just laugh, I had a teacher in a meditation, and like, I guess air quotes, spiritual teacher, who the stuff that was like really causing me a lot of harm in my life in terms of me taking really seriously and having a lot of fear about, a lot of identity about, did this thing, you just laugh at me about it. I'd be like, tell me more about how big a deal that is. You just laugh and laugh and laugh. Laugh at me. Yeah, I mean, the first thing is like, it makes you like, it's more anger. And then it kind of like, it does a little bit of its work. I mean, I guess it depends on the person, but. All right. So that is it. And so with that, you have now accomplished making it all the way through the adaptations and the holding patterns for the third hub with our minor excerpt or minor omission, which is self-led, self-practice. And the next session, we are going to get into the techniques and exercises, which I'm really excited about. And once we wrap these up, we get to move into the third hub, which I am really, really looking, fourth hub, which I'm really excited about. So yeah, I'm very happy about this. So anyway, thank you. And I will see you next time. And this was a highly charged one, but if you have the book, a good time to go into the chapter 11 section and do some of those practices, even going back to, so specifically for journaling, for processing, but even in the techniques and exercises that we're about to get into is to do those. Physicality in this hub is incredibly important. So, I think, the thing is, folks can get, you can really get a lot out of this just by reading it as a practice. But I think one of the things to be cognizant of is that not engaging the physical aspect of the practice in this is actually you're not alone if this is you, because there are folks that have a whole thing about this, about like they're deep into the like academia of it, I guess you could call. But it's to really tap into this unity of the reflex, emotion, and logic. This is the yoke. The physical movement, and even the practices of this, of actually having responsiveness tools to bring to this. So if you're having feelings arising, if you're like starting to build a suite of the techniques that you use in response to things. So tapping, fantastic. But what I'm presenting is a variety in the book of very accessible practices. This is not exhaustive by any means, that can be used as you begin to become very responsive and aware of arising feelings, of arising, like even reflexive behavior, that this is where it begins to really build momentum. But whatever point of entry is fine. But the ultimate, some of the like the real profound ultimate shifts that can occur are counterintuitively rapid, and supported when they're done through the physical arm of the practice. So anyhow, so again, I just want to thank you for watching, interacting. I love you, and I can't wait till next time. All right. Bye for now.